Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Monster of the Week, the show where we dig up old creatures from past editions of D&D and other tabletop games and bring them to light for current use in your 5th edition D&D campaign. My name is Josiah, also known as Dungeon Dad, and today we are going to be talking about a monster which might be able to fill the gap in your game that lycanthropy usually falls into, but without any of the actual lycanthropes. Today we are talking about the Tigbanua Buso. This monster is originally based on Filipino folklore and found its way into AD&D and then eventually 3.5, so I apologize if my pronunciation isn't perfect because I'm basically just giving it my best guess at this point. Believe it or not, searching Tigbanua Buso pronunciation into Google doesn't actually bring up any results. But that's never stopped me before, so today we are going to talk about exactly what this creature is, how it fights, and some creative ways that you can use it in your D&D campaign. But before we get things rolling here, let's talk about just exactly what this creature is. As you can see, the Tigbanua Buso has a giant eye in the middle of its head. It's very ghoulish in its appearance. It's got sinewy, leathery skin and a very slight, grotesque, kind of skinny jacked build going on. Saying nothing, of course, about its razor-sharp claws and its maw filled with razor-sharp teeth. Just one look at this creature should tell you it's bad news, and you'd be right. They are destructive monsters that revel in bloodshed and killing and basically just exist to consume, and as if that weren't bad enough, they carry a curse with them that they can pass on through their claws, and anyone who is unlucky enough to be affected by this curse will ultimately turn into one of them. Sounds pretty cool / terrible, right? Well, I thought so too. So today, as always, we're going to talk about just exactly what this creature is, how it fights, and some creative ways that you might be able to use it in your game. And as always, I have converted this creature into 5th edition, and there is a 5th edition stat block in the description of this video in the form of a Google document, so feel free to follow along with that if you want to. But with all that said, hopefully someone in the party prepped Remove Curse because it is time for... So when it comes to actually fighting a Tigbanua Buso, there are a few things we need to know first off. For starters, this is a CR3 monster, so this is something you're going to throw up against your party as kind of like a big monster really early on in the game, or you're going to use a group of them together against a mid to higher level party. These creatures have a pretty basic kit when it comes to dealing damage. They have a multi-attack that allows them to swipe twice with their claws and once with their bite, each of those attacks causing a pretty normal amount of damage for their CR threshold. But where things start to get really interesting is when you look at the traits of this creature. For starters, they have a fear aura, which is basically an aura within 10 feet all around this creature that causes anyone who starts their turn there or who enters it to become afraid of the Buso. The creature is most likely your party members will of course get to make a wisdom saving throw to resist being frightened, but if they are frightened they will be forced to move away from it. The second trait, of course, is the tagamaling curse. If you're looking at the stat block as we talk about this, you'll see that this curse is pretty wordy because it is very involved. It's passed on the same way that lycanthropy is, in a fashion. If a creature is hit by a claw attack from this thing, it has to make a constitution saving throw. If it fails, it contracts the curse. And then, nothing happens. At least not right away. If a creature contracts the tagamaling curse, every night when they go to sleep, speaking mechanically here, whenever your party takes a long rest, there's a 1% chance that creature undergoes a horrific transformation and turns into a tagamaling Buso. What is a tagamaling Buso, you ask? Well, you'll also notice in the stat block that there is a secondary, tinier stat block, and that is for the tagamaling. Essentially, it's a weaker version of the Tigbanua. It still does the same amount of damage with its claws and bites, but it only gets 2 attacks per turn instead of 3, and it doesn't have the fear aura, and it also can't pass the curse on, at least not right away. As I mentioned, there's a 1% chance that they transform into one of these horrific creatures every night. During the night, if a creature who's contracted this curse does indeed roll poorly on their percentile chance to transform, and they transform into this thing, they go on a killing spree, just attacking everything within their reach. And they will do so only to wake up the next morning with no memory of anything that happened, and they also gain a level of exhaustion. Yeah, these guys are totally different than lycanthropes. But wait, they actually are, because things are about to get a lot worse for our victim here who has contracted this curse. See, while there is only a 1% chance that they transform on the first night, the second night, it becomes a 2% chance, and then a 3% chance, and so on and so forth. Basically meaning, after 100 days, there is a 100% chance that every time that person goes to sleep, they're going to transform into this horrible monster. The only way to get rid of this curse is with a remove curse spell. So there's an element of racing the clock, because not only do you have to get this curse removed in due course, but also every night that it's not removed is a night that the percentage chance of you transforming into this thing is just going to keep going up and up and up. The first week even, you probably won't transform. That's a pretty low percentage chance, but I mean, it could happen. But once some time goes by, eventually it's going to start happening more and more until it's every night. And once 100 days pass, and it does indeed become a 100% chance that every night this person is going to transform into this monster, they can no longer be cured of this curse, because they then become a Tigbanua Buso, meaning that they can then pass the curse on to others. And that is how these monsters propagate their kind. It's pretty horrific. As far as actually how to run the combat with these guys, they are very much set up to be ambush predators. They're not very smart, so they're not going to be using a lot of advanced tactics or anything like that, but they do have proficiency in stealth, and they're very good at hunting people down, basically. So they're going to try to find a lone individual who can't really defend themselves and jump them in the night. If there's a pack of them, they might even get a little bit more bold and try to take on a group of traveling villagers or merchants or something. Or who knows, maybe even an adventuring party, which finds themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time on the wrong road. Point is, once the initial ambush is broken, these guys are complete savages. They won't typically fight to the death unless forced to. They will run away because they have that self-preservation instinct, but they're going to be going pretty much all out until things become dire for them. Now, just talking about how this curse works and the other components of this monster has already got me thinking of some awesome plot hooks, so we're going to move along and talk about some. So first and foremost, let's just get this out of the way immediately. Any plot line that involves lycanthropy or werewolves or anything like that can pretty much be used with these guys instead if you wanted to kind of throw your players for a loop. The Tigbanua Buso can be a great way to mix up an old trope. You know, everyone knows how werewolves work. We know that they're weak to silver, and we know that they change with the full moon and all that stuff. But not everyone knows how these more obscure curse-passing Ani monsters work. I honestly love the idea of setting it up almost as a werewolf adventure. So the players go into this and they're like, oh, here we go. Looks like there's a werewolf problem in this town, and they're getting their silvered weapons ready and everything, only to be encountered with this and just be horrified at something that they were not expecting to see at all. But moving on from the lycanthropy stuff, being creatures from established folklore, there are tons of stories out there that can inform us and inspire us in how we might use these for a D&D game. For example, something I learned while doing my research is that both varieties of Busos, the cursed ones that are kind of shifting, and the Tigbanuas, the ones that are permanently monsters, are scared of dogs, which is such a random detail. And we see that a lot in folklore from all across the world, is these little kind of niche details about the monster, and that's one of them, which actually wasn't mentioned anywhere in the original D&D stat block, but I added in a little thing in the description here for these guys. You can choose to completely ignore that because it's not really something that has game mechanics attached to it, but I do like the idea of there being this little village out in the mountains that the players come across, and everyone there has a pet dog and everyone travels with dogs and stuff, and it's something that to the players might just seem oh, I guess these people really like keeping dogs. I don't know, but there's a reason for it. And if your players choose to dig into that, that can be a little hint about something that might happen on the road, for example. Maybe the Tigbanuas are getting a little bit more feisty and they're starting to push their limits a bit more, and they're gathering in bigger groups, and the dogs aren't working as well as maybe they once did. Another fun little detail I discovered in my research is that the blood of a Tigbanua was actually highly prized. It was thought that the blood of these creatures had some sort of life-giving quality to it. If you could get some of their blood and sprinkle it on your crops, they would grow tenfold, so by the time harvest season came, you would get a much higher quantity of whatever it was you were growing. That's a premium adventure hook, because maybe your players come across one of these villages and there's like a bounty poster up for their blood or something like that, and the players can go out and hunt down these creatures for the purpose of bringing their bodies and having them drained of blood to make the crops grow. It's kind of like a ghoulish take on something that is ultimately for the common good, but I mean, it just feels gross, feels wrong in some way. Not to mention the fact that their blood could possibly be distilled into healing potions by a proper alchemist. But speaking of ghoulish things, another fun fact about these creatures is that they are often mistaken for undead. This is because they do bear a striking resemblance to ghouls, which are a known and feared type of undead creature. So it's possible that maybe your party gets called in to deal with some type of ghoul infestation nearby, and like they're gearing up and preparing to cast all kinds of spells and magic to turn away undead, such as, I don't know, turn undead. This is where you see the cleric and the paladin in the party cracking their knuckles, getting ready to do what they do best. But it turns out it was a misidentification. The creatures aren't undead at all. Oh no. Suddenly the things that they've prepared, like protection from good and evil, aren't working anymore, and that's bad. I mean, unless you're some variety of Buso, in which case I guess it's good, but hey, I think all these different little details can be fun ways to set up a really immersive encounter with these creatures. Whether you're using them as kind of like a passing through the village, this thing happens and the party can choose whether they want to engage with it or not, or you're kind of using it as the main focus of a small, low-level campaign, there's a lot of room to explore with the Tigbanua Buso. It's also worth mentioning that the way you handle the infection caused by this creature's curse can be really fun. Because it's not akin to lycanthropy, where the players fail their save and they kind of know how it works and they get what's going to happen. And they know, like lycanthropy is really well documented, right? So it's easy to figure out what to do. Even if the player characters don't know it in-game, the players likely know it, and their characters are likely to be able to find an easy way to deal with lycanthropy because it's so common. This curse is something completely different, so your players aren't going to know what to do right away, and they're going to have to do some digging and some research. And if one of the players actually contracts this curse, it's not going to be evidently apparent that anything is wrong. As a DM, there's nothing more precious than when you attack a player with a creature and it hits them for like 5 damage or something, and you say, okay, make a constitution save, and they roll like a 4. And they go, well, guess I fail, what happens? And then you as the DM say, oh, nothing, don't worry about it. Whose turn is it? Right. Those players are going to be paranoid about that, and then probably forget. And what you as the DM get to do is roll that percentile behind the screen when they go for a long rest. They're probably not going to transform that night, it's only a 1% chance, but the players might see you rolling something and they're like, I wonder what's going on back there. And that's again when you drop the infamous DM line, oh, don't worry about it. And what you as the DM need to do is keep a record of which players have this curse and how many times you've rolled and what the percentage chance is that they're going to transform. And whether the players notice that you're rolling dice or not doesn't really matter, but what's important is eventually, if they aren't like aware of the whole circumstance with these monsters and everything that's going on, like maybe there's just a random encounter where they're attacked one night while they're camping and they've forgotten about it and they move on, eventually you will get to a point where whichever player has contracted this curse transforms. And what's going to happen is the rest of the party is likely going to wake up to some horrible noises and see where one of their companions was resting a horrible one-eyed monster very similar to the monsters they fought not too long ago, wearing shredded, torn-up versions of that character's clothes. This is especially great if the transformation happens when the party is at like a local town or something like that. Like maybe they've been traveling on the road for a week or so, and then they finally get to this city where they are going to pursue whatever their next goal is, and one of the party members has this transformation in a tavern. Because then who knows who might be around that could kind of catch some flack from this horrible one-eyed monster. It won't take long for the party to realize what's going on, and then that can kind of become a whole thing, is trying to cure this. If they have someone in the party or they have immediate access to the remove curse spell, it's not too punishing, which is why I like it. Because it basically is up to you as the DM how easy you want this to be to get rid of, right? If you want this curse to be like a horrible thing that a low-level party has to deal with, you can make it inaccessible to get this spell, and they're not going to be high enough level to cast it either, so they have to like seek out someone who can find it or go find a scroll of remove curse or something. But if you don't want it to be this big thing that might potentially slow down your overall campaign, if that's how you're using them, then yeah, the cleric casts remove curse, or you go down to the local church and pay 50 gold, they cast remove curse for you, whatever, problem solved. You had your fun monster moment, and then you get to move on. You can pretty much adjust the severity of this however you want to, which is really neat. One other fringe detail here is that the entry for this monster specifically states that once it has reached a 100% transformation rate every night and it turns into a full-on Tigbanua Buso, the only way to reverse that transformation is with a wish spell or some type of divine intervention. That's very fascinating, because it implies that if the party is able to capture one of these horrible monsters and then somehow gets access to wish or an act of divine intervention, they could potentially transform that person back into who they were before they became this monster. This, of course, is now getting into like some high-level stuff, unless you want to go the divine intervention route and God comes down and says, "What up? Don't worry, I got you." But I find that fascinating, and I think it's cool that there's a way to reverse the permanent state of this monster, and who knows what type of person they might discover, or what type of NPC you could bring into your world by having the party heal one of these misshapen monstrosities. In any case, that is all I've got for this monster this week, so thank you so much for watching. I think these guys are really cool. I think they're going to find a lot of fun and interesting homes in a lot of campaigns out there, so let me know if you have used this monster before, or if you have plans to use it, or if you're going to use it, then you use it and stuff happens, come back and tell us how it went. Also, if you have a monster that you would like to see show up on this channel with a 5th edition conversion, please leave a comment. Let me know. I'm always expanding and adding to the list of suggestions. Speaking of which, a big shout out to Kill Stardo over on the Discord and the Monster Suggestions chat for recommending this monster. As I mentioned before, there is a 5th edition conversion of this creature, which you can find in the description below. And if you are one of my lovely patrons, of course, you have access to the full 5th edition stat block with the artwork and the monster entries and all that stuff, which is up on the Patreon page. But I guess you guys have known that since Monday, so welcome to the video. Thank you very much for your support, guys. I appreciate it very much, and thank you everybody for watching. If you're brand new here, you like these videos, leave a like, subscribe, you know how this works. I will see you all in the next one. Wait, what if they actually are just lycanthropes and it's like a lycanthrope of some weird messed up animal that we haven't seen before?